Ethan Miller lived on the edge of the American frontier, where the land seemed endless and the wind whispered through the tall grasses. His ranch was small, yet it was all he had, and he worked tirelessly from sunrise to sunset to keep it running. He was a man of few words, shaped by years of hard work and the solitude that came with living so far from other people. The ranch had once been bustling, with his family there to share in the daily chores, the laughter, and the warmth of togetherness. But now, after a bitter winter that had claimed the lives of his wife and young son, Ethan's world had become quiet in a way that felt both peaceful and painfully lonely. Each morning, he woke before the sun and walked out to the stables. The horses and cattle recognized him, nuzzling his hands or following him around the ranch, as if they understood the emptiness he carried in his heart. He tended to them carefully, checking the fences, feeding the animals, and mending broken tools with his skilled hands. Though the work was hard, it gave him a sense of purpose. Yet, at night, as he sat by the small fireplace in his modest cabin, the silence seemed heavier than the day's labor. He missed the sound of laughter, the warmth of a shared meal, and the gentle presence of someone to talk to. Ethan had grown accustomed to living alone, but he knew the loneliness could be dangerous. Life on the frontier was unforgiving. Wild animals roamed nearby, and the forest that bordered his property hid more than just trees. It concealed threats that a man alone could barely handle. One morning, after a long week of checking the fences and making repairs, Ethan decided to ride out to the northern edge of his land. He needed to inspect the pasture where the youngest calves grazed and ensure no predators had been lingering nearby. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and for a moment, the world felt calm and beautiful. As he rode his horse along the worn trail, Ethan noticed signs of movement in the forest ahead. At first, he thought it might be deer or a fox, but then he saw figures moving with purpose. Before he could react, a group of people emerged from the shadows, surrounding him swiftly and silently. Ethan's heart raced, but he tried to remain calm, knowing that panic could be deadly. He was quickly disarmed, and before he could speak, he realized the group was made up entirely of women. They were unlike anyone he had ever seen, strong, confident, and fearless. Their eyes were sharp, and their movements were precise. Ethan soon learned that he had been captured by a small Apache group, a tribe that lived in the forest and was known for its fierce independence. What made this tribe different was that it was led and protected primarily by women. The men were few, often absent, or occupied elsewhere, while the women managed everything from hunting to governing the community. Ethan had read about tribes in books, but he had never imagined meeting one like this, especially not in such a personal and sudden way. He was guided carefully through the forest, unsure whether he was considered a prisoner, a guest, or something in between. At first, Ethan tried to speak, to explain who he was and why he was there, but the women were cautious. They watched him closely, analyzing his every move. He noticed the intricate patterns of their clothing, the way they carried themselves, and the tools they used. It was clear they had their own rules, their own way of life, and they did not take kindly to outsiders who disrespected their traditions. Ethan knew he had to be careful. He could not rely on charm or words alone. He would need to prove himself through actions. The journey through the forest was long, and Ethan's horse struggled along the narrow trails. Yet, he began to observe the land around him, noticing how the tribe had adapted to it. They moved silently, leaving little trace of their passage, and seemed to know every path and hidden corner. He saw women carrying baskets of gathered herbs, others leading horses, and some tending small fires that cooked meals over open flames. Everything they did was purposeful, and every movement had meaning. Ethan felt a mix of awe and fear. He was stepping into a world that operated on rules he had never learned, and he realized that survival here required more than strength. It required understanding and respect. As the day wore on, the tribe arrived at a small clearing where their community was centered. There were simple but well-built shelters, smoke rising from fires, and the sounds of daily life. Children ran and played under the watchful eyes of older women, and the air was filled with the smells of cooking and the hum of activity. Ethan was introduced to the space carefully, and while he could not speak the language fluently, he understood, through gestures and observation, how things were organized. He noticed the care they took in tending to the animals, preparing food, and maintaining the community. It was a place of hard work, yes, but also of respect and cooperation. At first, the women kept their distance. They would watch him, exchange glances, and speak in tones he could not understand. Ethan understood that trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. He decided to show his willingness to help. He began assisting with the animals, repairing fences, and carrying water from a nearby stream. His hands were skilled, and he approached every task with patience. Slowly, some of the women started to notice his efforts, a nod of approval here, a small smile there. It was clear he was beginning to earn their cautious respect. Evenings were the hardest for Ethan. Sitting by the fire, he would listen to the sounds of the tribe, the laughter of children, the songs of women, the crackling of flames. He realized that while he had been lonely, he had also been sheltered. This community, though foreign to him, seemed to have a rhythm and purpose he had never experienced before. He began to study their habits, the way they communicated without words, and the care they showed for one another. He understood that to survive here, and perhaps even to thrive, he would need to learn from them rather than impose his own ways. As the days passed, Ethan started to notice small signs of acceptance. A basket of food left near his shelter, a woman showing him how to mend a torn blanket, or a child seeking his attention for a moment of play. These small gestures, though simple, meant more to him than words could express. They were signs that he was no longer just an outsider. He felt a cautious hope that perhaps he could find a place here. Not just as a guest, but as someone who contributed and belonged. But life with the tribe was not without challenges. Ethan faced harsh work, unexpected dangers in the forest, and the constant uncertainty of how the women truly viewed him. He made mistakes, breaking tools, misunderstanding instructions, or speaking in ways that confused them. Each mistake was met with patience, not anger, and he learned quickly. He began to understand the importance of observation, listening, and humility. This was not a place to dominate, it was a place to earn respect through action and character. By the end of the first month, Ethan had established a routine. He rose with the sun, worked alongside the women, helped tend the animals, and gradually became part of the daily rhythm. He learned to anticipate needs, whether it was bringing water, fixing a fence, or assisting in hunting preparations. The tribe, in turn, began to rely on him in small ways. They trusted him not blindly, but cautiously, and that trust felt like a fragile but precious bridge between their worlds. Ethan often reflected on how strange life had become. Just weeks ago, he had been a lonely rancher, struggling to keep his property and heart intact. Now, he was part of a community that operated in a way he had never known. Though the language and customs were unfamiliar, the values, hard work, respect, courage, and care for others resonated deeply with him. He realized that while he had lost much in his past life, he had an opportunity here to build something meaningful again. Not through wealth or power, but through trust, friendship, and dedication. The sun dipped below the horizon one evening as Ethan tended to a small fire. He watched the children play, the women prepare food, and the smoke rise into the sky. A feeling of peace settled over him, mingled with the excitement of the unknown. He did not know what the future held, but he knew that for the first time in a long while, he felt part of something larger than himself. The forest, the tribe, and their way of life had opened a door. He never expected to find a door that promised challenge, growth, and perhaps even the warmth of connection he had longed for. And so, Ethan Miller, the lonely rancher, began a new chapter of his life, not as a solitary man wandering the frontier, but as a careful, respectful presence in a remarkable community led by courageous and wise women. The journey had only just begun, and every day brought a new lesson, a new challenge, and the faint but growing hope that he might one day truly belong. Ethan Miller had been with the Apache women's tribe for several weeks now, and though he was still an outsider, He had begun to understand their ways. Every day brought new lessons, and he quickly realized that life in this community was unlike anything he had known on his ranch. Here, strength was not measured by how many cattle a man could raise or how far he could ride, but by wisdom, skill, and the ability to care for others. The women of the tribe were remarkable leaders, hunters, healers, and teachers all in one. They worked tirelessly, yet there was an elegance and harmony to their movements that fascinated Ethan. Each morning, he woke before the sun, the soft light filtering through the trees surrounding the tribe's clearing. The first sounds he heard were usually the children laughing and the low murmur of conversation among the women as they prepared for the day. He would stretch his stiff muscles from the long ride to the forest the previous day and begin helping with chores. Fetching water from the nearby stream, carrying firewood, or tending to the small herd of goats became part of his routine. These tasks were not easy, but they gave him the chance to observe the tribe closely and learn their ways. One of the first lessons Ethan learned was the importance of respecting boundaries. The women valued personal space, and each had her own responsibilities and areas of expertise. At first, he struggled to find the right balance. He wanted to help, but sometimes his assistance was clumsy or unnecessary. A basket of herbs might be overturned, or a bundle of firewood stacked too carelessly. Each mistake brought a glance of disapproval, or a quiet shake of the head, but never anger. The tribe did not punish recklessness. Instead, they taught through patience and example. Ethan realized that if he wanted to be trusted, he had to listen, observe, and act with care. As the days passed, Ethan began to notice the complexity of the tribe's life. The women had distinct roles but worked together seamlessly. Some focused on gathering food from the forest berries, roots, and medicinal herbs, while others hunted or fished. A few tended to the children, teaching them skills they would need as they grew. The community ran like a well-oiled machine, each person contributing their talents to the greater good. Ethan admired their efficiency and grace, but what impressed him most was their mutual respect and reliance on one another. Every action was purposeful, every decision considered carefully. Ethan wanted to prove himself, to show that he was more than a helpless outsider. He began to offer his knowledge of animals and farming, helping the tribe improve the pens for their goats and chickens, showing them ways to store food to prevent spoilage, and assisting with small repairs to the shelters. At first, the women watched skeptically. They were cautious of his intentions, unsure whether he understood their ways or would disrupt their careful balance. But as they saw the care and attention he put into his work, their skepticism began to fade. Small nods, quiet smiles, and approving glances told Ethan that he was slowly earning their trust. One morning, while helping gather firewood, Ethan noticed a group of women preparing for a hunt. Their movements were precise, almost like a dance. They checked their weapons, secured their packs, and whispered instructions to each other in the language Ethan was beginning to understand. He marveled at their skill and discipline. It was then that he realized the women were not only caretakers but also warriors. They protected their community with courage and intelligence, and their strength was a source of pride rather than fear. Ethan felt a deep respect for them, understanding that survival in this land required more than brute force. It required wisdom, cooperation, and determination. Over the next few weeks, Ethan continued to immerse himself in the tribe's daily life. He learned to recognize the different herbs and their uses, how to prepare simple meals over an open fire, and how to care for the children without being intrusive. He began to observe the relationships among the women, noticing how they communicated with subtle gestures, exchanged knowing glances, and shared responsibilities without conflict. It was a system built on trust, respect, and understanding, and Ethan found himself learning more than just practical skills. He was learning about human connection and community in a way he had never known. Despite his growing confidence, Ethan knew he still had much to prove. One afternoon, as he helped herd goats back to the pen, a sudden commotion erupted. A young girl had wandered too close to the river and slipped on the muddy bank. Ethan's instincts took over. Without thinking, he ran toward her, lunged, and caught her just as she fell into the water. The girl coughed and shivered, but she was safe. The women who had been nearby rushed over, their eyes wide with concern and relief. For a moment, there was silence, and then one of the elder women nodded at him, a small but powerful gesture of approval. Ethan realized that actions, not words, were the true measure of trust in this community. The incident with the child marked a turning point for Ethan. The women began to see him not just as a helper or observer, but as someone capable of protecting and supporting their community. He still made mistakes, but they were no longer overlooked with suspicion. They were met with guidance and patience. Ethan took every lesson to heart, determined to improve and contribute more. He learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to act with thoughtfulness, and to respect the wisdom that each woman carried. Ethan's nights were quiet, yet filled with reflection. Sitting by his small fire, he would watch the stars and think about the life he had left behind. His ranch, once full of purpose and companionship, now seemed distant and unreal. The tribe's forest home, though challenging and unfamiliar, had opened his eyes to a different kind of life. One where connection, respect, and shared responsibility mattered more than wealth or isolation. He began to feel a sense of belonging he had not experienced in years, a feeling that both surprised and comforted him. One day, a group of women invited Ethan to join them in preparing for a community gathering. They were weaving baskets, preparing food, and decorating the central area with colorful patterns made from natural dyes. At first, Ethan felt awkward. He had never woven a basket in his life, and he worried about slowing them down. But the women guided him patiently, showing him the techniques step by step. His first attempts were clumsy, but he persisted, and with their guidance, he improved. By the end of the day, he had created a small but functional basket. The women's approving smiles and gentle laughter made him feel proud not for himself, but for being part of something larger than his own desires. As weeks turned into months, Ethan's understanding of the tribe deepened. He began to recognize the rhythms of their life, the way the women coordinated hunts, the methods they used to gather and preserve food, and the rituals they performed to honor their ancestors and the land. He also began to understand the subtle bonds between them, the unspoken ways they supported each other, shared knowledge, and offered comfort in times of need. Ethan realized that the strength of this community was not just in physical skill, but in emotional intelligence, empathy, and unity. Through it all, Ethan continued to earn the trust of the women. Small gestures, a basket carried, a meal prepared, a goat tended, built a bridge between him and the tribe. They began to speak to him more freely, offering guidance, sharing stories, and even seeking his opinion on matters where his knowledge could help. He felt a sense of pride in being trusted, but he never took it for granted. He knew that trust was fragile, and he worked every day to honor it with his actions and respect. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Ethan sat by the central fire with the women gathered around. They shared food, stories, and laughter, and for the first time, Ethan felt truly included. The warmth of the fire mirrored the warmth he felt in his heart. He realized that the life he had thought he wanted, quiet solitude on his ranch, was not the only way to live. Here, in the heart of the forest with these remarkable women, he had found a life filled with meaning, purpose, and connection. And so, Ethan Miller, once a lonely rancher, began to transform alongside the tribe. He was no longer just a man trying to survive. He was a part of a community that valued every individual's contribution. He was learning not only to live but to thrive, guided by patience, humility, and the simple yet powerful truth that respect and care could open doors that fear and suspicion could never touch. Every day brought a new lesson, a new challenge, and a growing sense of belonging he had never imagined possible. Ethan had begun to see that this journey was not just about learning survival skills or earning trust. It was about understanding the heart of a community, embracing the strength and wisdom of its members, and discovering that true connection could heal even the deepest loneliness. Ethan Miller had now been living with the Apache women's tribe for several months. The initial days of confusion and cautious observation had passed, and he was no longer merely an outsider. The women had begun to see his value not only for his work, but also for his character. Still, Ethan understood that trust and respect were earned slowly, through actions, patience, and courage. Words alone could not prove him. He had to demonstrate his loyalty, skill, and bravery in ways that mattered to the tribe. One morning, as Ethan was helping repair a section of the fence, the sound of urgent shouting pierced the air. The women's sharp voices carried through the trees, and he saw a small group of children running toward the clearing, tears on their faces. Ethan instinctively dropped the tools he was holding and sprinted after them, his heart pounding. When he arrived, he discovered that a young girl had wandered near the forest edge and had been trapped by a sudden drop in the terrain. Without thinking, Ethan quickly assessed the danger and found a safe way to reach her. He extended his hand and, with careful guidance, helped her climb back to solid ground. The elder women, who had been watching from a distance, rushed over. Their eyes were filled with a mix of concern and relief. But as they observed Ethan's calm handling of the situation, their expressions softened. It was a pivotal moment. Courage and composure under pressure spoke louder than any words could. The tribe began to see Ethan as someone who could be relied upon in moments of crisis, not just for labor, but as a protector and ally. After this incident, Ethan's confidence grew, but he remained humble. He knew that he was part of a larger system, and that every member of the tribe, regardless of age or role, contributed to its strength. He began to participate more actively in hunts and daily chores, always attentive to the techniques and strategies employed by the women. He learned to track animals through the forest, read the signs of their movements, and anticipate where game might be found. His previous life as a rancher had given him experience with animals, but the skills required in the forest were far more complex and demanding. During one hunt, Ethan experienced the tribe's strength and precision firsthand. The women moved with silent coordination, communicating through subtle gestures and eye contact. Ethan tried to match their rhythm, careful not to disturb the animals or slow the group. At first, he lagged behind, clumsy and unsure, but with gentle guidance from one of the hunters, he began to understand. By the end of the day, he had helped track a small herd of deer to a safe location for hunting. Though he had not participated in the kill, his contribution was acknowledged with respectful nods and quiet smiles. He felt a sense of pride, not for taking life, but for earning trust through effort and understanding. Ethan also discovered the healing and medicinal knowledge that the women possessed. One afternoon, he noticed a young boy with a scraped knee, tears streaking his dirt-covered face. A woman immediately took charge, washing the wound with herbal solutions and explaining each step to Ethan in their language. He watched carefully, memorizing the procedures and learning the names and uses of various plants. Over time, he was allowed to assist with minor injuries, gaining confidence in the ways the tribe cared for its members. The women's patience and willingness to teach him demonstrated that respect could be earned through humility and a genuine desire to help. Life in the tribe also taught Ethan about patience in relationships. The women were wary of outsiders, and building bonds required consistency, integrity, and respect for their traditions. Ethan never attempted to force friendship or affection. Instead, he focused on small, meaningful gestures: carrying water, repairing shelters, helping with cooking, or sharing knowledge about livestock. Slowly, these actions spoke louder than words. The women began to involve him in decisions about daily life, seeking his advice on practical matters and including him in discussions about food preparation, animal care, and even minor disputes. He began to feel not just included, but valued as a member of the tribe. One evening, while sitting by the central fire with the women and children, Ethan was asked to participate in a storytelling circle. The tribe used stories to teach lessons, pass down history, and inspire courage. He listened attentively as the women spoke of past hunts, tribal challenges, and lessons of patience and bravery. When it was his turn, he hesitated at first. He had never considered himself a storyteller, but he began to share a simple tale from his life on the ranch. A story about perseverance, hard work, and caring for animals. The women listened quietly, nodding and smiling, and Ethan realized that honesty and sincerity were as powerful as skill and bravery. As the weeks passed, Ethan became increasingly involved in the tribe's most challenging tasks. One day, a storm swept through the area, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. Trees fell across trails, and the small river threatened to overflow. The tribe moved quickly to protect their homes and animals, and Ethan was right there beside them. He helped reinforce shelters, guided animals to safer ground, and assisted in clearing debris from paths. Exhausted by the end of the day, he was filled with a sense of accomplishment. The women's approving glances and quiet words of thanks reminded him that shared hardship strengthens bonds in ways comfort cannot. Another turning point came during a minor conflict with neighboring wildlife. A group of coyotes had been preying on the tribe's goats, and Ethan suggested using knowledge from his ranching days to set up safe enclosures and deterrents. The women considered his advice carefully and implemented his suggestions, which successfully protected the animals. This success further demonstrated that Ethan's contributions were meaningful and practical. The tribe's respect for him deepened, not just as someone who worked hard, but as someone who thought critically and acted responsibly. Ethan also began to understand the emotional connections within the tribe. He observed the quiet ways the women supported each other, how they comforted children, shared wisdom, and handled disagreements. He realized that strength was not only physical but emotional, and that true leadership involved empathy, patience, and the ability to listen. Ethan started to emulate these qualities in his own interactions, showing kindness and understanding even in small daily tasks. The women began to notice, and their trust and warmth toward him continued to grow. By now, Ethan had earned the trust of most of the tribe, and even the most skeptical women were beginning to rely on him in meaningful ways. He was invited to participate in strategic planning for hunts, caring for the children, and maintaining the village's infrastructure. His suggestions were considered thoughtfully, and his efforts were acknowledged with smiles, nods, and small gestures of appreciation. For the first time since he had lost his family, Ethan felt a sense of belonging and purpose that went beyond mere survival. One afternoon, while walking through the forest with one of the elder women, Ethan was asked to help gather herbs for medicine. As they worked side by side, she spoke quietly about the importance of patience, observation, and respect for the land. Ethan listened intently, absorbing every word. He realized that this tribe's way of life was deeply connected to nature, and that understanding and respecting that connection was essential to being accepted fully. He began to see the forest not as a threatening, foreign place, but as a living, teaching environment that offered lessons to those willing to listen. As the days turned into months, Ethan became not just a helper, but a trusted member of the tribe. He learned to anticipate needs, to act without being asked, and to support the women in ways that mattered most. His respect for their traditions and patience in learning their ways had opened doors that force or charm never could. He was still an outsider in some ways, but he was no longer a stranger. He had become part of a community that valued courage, respect, humility, and care for one another. Evenings were now moments of reflection and quiet joy. Ethan would sit by the fire, listening to the women and children share stories, songs, and laughter. He often thought about the life he had left behind the ranch, the solitude, the endless days of work with no companionship. But here, amidst the forest and the tribe, he had found something he had thought impossible: connection, respect, and a sense of home. And so, Ethan Miller continued to grow not only in skill but in character. Through courage, humility, patience, and care, he had begun to win the trust and hearts of the Apache women. He knew that the journey ahead would still hold challenges, but he also understood that every day offered an opportunity to strengthen bonds, prove his worth, and become part of a community that had once seemed completely out of reach. The lonely rancher was no longer just surviving. He was thriving in a life built on respect, trust, and meaningful connections. Ethan Miller had been living with the Apache women's tribe for nearly a year now. He was no longer the nervous, unsure outsider who had first stumbled into their forest. Through patience, courage, and unwavering respect, he had slowly become an integral part of their daily life. Yet, Earning the trust of the tribe was only the beginning. Ethan had begun to notice a deeper connection forming, not just respect for his skills and reliability, but a quiet warmth in the way the women acknowledged his presence. It was subtle at first, a nod here, a smile there, or a moment of shared laughter that seemed more meaningful than any words could express. The women of the tribe were remarkable, each possessing unique strengths and talents. Some were hunters, tracking game with precision and agility. Others were skilled in healing, using herbs, roots, and knowledge passed down through generations to care for every member of the tribe. Still others were teachers and storytellers, guiding the children with patience and wisdom. Ethan observed them closely, learning not only their practical skills but also their values, their deep respect for nature, their care for each other, and their unwavering courage. He understood that to be truly accepted, he needed to embody these values in his own actions. Ethan's first real opportunity to win hearts came unexpectedly. One morning, as he helped tend the goats near the edge of the forest, he noticed smoke rising from the far side of the clearing. Alarmed, he ran toward it and discovered that a small fire had started, likely from a lightning strike the night before. The flames were growing fast, and the women were trying to control it with limited water. Without hesitation, Ethan joined them, using his strength and quick thinking to help contain the blaze. He carried water from the stream, dug shallow trenches to stop the spread, and coordinated with the women to protect both the animals and the shelters. By the time the fire was finally under control, the women were exhausted but safe, and Ethan's calm and decisive action had prevented disaster. That day, something shifted. The women's eyes reflected admiration and trust that went beyond respect for his work. They began to see him as someone who cared deeply for the well-being of their community. Even those who had remained skeptical of his presence started to engage with him more openly, seeking his opinion, including him in decisions, and inviting him to share in daily activities. Ethan realized that trust could grow into affection when combined with genuine care and humility. Ethan continued to demonstrate his reliability through everyday actions. He helped repair tools, build storage spaces, and improve animal pens. But it was not just physical labor that mattered. It was his attitude, his patience, his willingness to listen, and his gentle manner that resonated with the women. He never sought praise or recognition. Instead, he focused on being helpful and understanding. And slowly, he became someone the tribe could depend on, in both work and guidance. One evening, the women invited Ethan to join them in preparing for a communal feast. It was a celebration of the harvest, a time to honor the land and the hard work that everyone had contributed. Ethan was initially unsure of his role, but the women guided him patiently. He learned to grind grains, prepare herbs, and cook simple dishes over an open flame. As he worked alongside them, he felt a sense of unity he had never experienced before. Laughter filled the air, children ran between the adults, and the warmth of the fire mirrored the warmth he felt in his heart. Through shared experiences like this, Ethan began to form bonds with each woman individually. He noticed their strengths, admired their wisdom, and listened to their stories. Some shared their childhood memories. Others told of challenges they had overcome. Ethan learned that each woman carried her own history and experiences, and he approached these stories with respect and empathy, never judgment. Over time, these small moments of connection became the foundation for genuine affection. The women saw not just a man who worked alongside them, but someone who truly valued and understood them. Ethan also learned the importance of humor and lightheartedness in building relationships. He found that gentle jokes, shared smiles, and moments of play with the children could break down barriers and create trust. He often helped the children with small tasks, guided them in simple lessons, or joined in their games. The women noticed these interactions and appreciated his kindness and patience. Through these everyday gestures, Ethan became more than a helper. He became a part of the family, someone who contributed to the emotional well-being of the tribe as much as the physical. One day, a group of women asked Ethan to accompany them on a longer hunt. This was both a practical mission and a test of his endurance, skill, and understanding of the tribe's ways. The hunt required careful tracking, patience, and the ability to move quietly through the forest. Ethan remembered everything he had learned: how to read signs of animal movements, how to anticipate weather changes, and how to communicate silently with the women. The hunt was successful, and the women returned with food and supplies, praising Ethan for his skill, observation, and cooperation. This shared achievement further strengthened his standing within the tribe. Over time, Ethan began to notice a change in the way the women interacted with him. They sought his advice, included him in their plans, and offered him small tokens of appreciation, gifts of food, hand-woven items, or gestures of affection. It was not a sudden change, but a gradual shift that reflected their growing respect and emotional connection. Ethan understood that these gestures were expressions of trust and warmth, and he received them with humility and gratitude. He did not seek attention or favor. He simply continued to act with sincerity and care. The deeper bonds Ethan formed were also rooted in shared challenges. There were storms, injuries, and moments of scarcity that required everyone to work together. Ethan never shied away from responsibility. He assisted in caring for the sick, helped rebuild shelters damaged by storms, and worked tirelessly to ensure the safety of the children and animals. Each act of service reinforced his value to the tribe and demonstrated that true respect is earned through consistent, selfless effort. In quieter moments, Ethan would sit by the fire with the women, listening to their stories and sharing his own. He learned about their ancestors, their traditions, and their deep connection to the land. In turn, he shared stories of his life on the ranch, the struggles he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. These exchanges created a mutual understanding and a shared sense of history, bridging the gap between his world and theirs. Through this, Ethan began to feel a deep, emotional connection with the tribe, and they began to feel the same toward him. By now, Ethan had become indispensable to the tribe in both practical and emotional ways. He was trusted to make decisions in difficult situations, to care for children and animals, and to assist in critical tasks like hunting, building, and gathering food. But perhaps most importantly, he had won the hearts of the women through patience, respect, and unwavering support. They no longer saw him as merely an outsider. He was a valued member of their community, someone whose presence brought safety, wisdom, and warmth. As the sun set one evening, casting golden light across the forest clearing, Ethan watched the tribe prepare for a small celebration. Children laughed, women worked together to prepare food, and the air was filled with a sense of harmony and shared purpose. Ethan realized that he had found something he had long thought impossible: a community that accepted him, valued him, and cared for him in return. He had started as a lonely rancher, uncertain and fearful. But through courage, humility, and consistent effort, he had become an integral part of a remarkable group of people. Ethan also understood that winning hearts was not about charm or flattery. It was about showing kindness, respecting traditions, working hard, and demonstrating reliability. It was about being present, listening, learning, and contributing in meaningful ways. Through his actions, he had built relationships based on trust and sincerity, and the women of the tribe responded in kind. In the months that followed, Ethan continued to strengthen these bonds. He helped with larger projects, participated in teaching the children, and took on responsibilities that were once reserved for the women who had trained him. His presence became natural and welcomed, and the tribe's harmony flourished with his contributions. Ethan had not only earned their trust but also their affection, respect, and friendship, a far deeper connection than he had ever imagined when he first arrived in the forest. Ethan Miller's transformation was complete. The lonely rancher, who had stumbled into the forest as a captive, had grown into a respected, trusted, and beloved member of the Apache women's tribe. He had learned their ways, embraced their values, and shown, through patient and selfless effort, that he belonged. And in return, the tribe had opened their hearts to him, showing that respect, care, and consistent action could create bonds stronger than fear or suspicion. Through this journey, Ethan discovered that true connection comes from understanding, respect, and shared effort, and that by embodying these qualities, even a man who once felt completely alone could become part of something extraordinary: a family, a community, and a home where he was cherished by every member. Ethan Miller had come a long way since the day he was first captured by the Apache women's tribe. What had begun as fear and uncertainty had transformed into trust, respect, and a sense of belonging he had never thought possible. The lonely rancher who had wandered into the forest now moved confidently among the tribe, fully integrated into their daily life. Over the months, he had learned their language, their customs, their values, and their ways of living in harmony with the land. More importantly, he had formed genuine connections with each woman, the children, and the community as a whole. Life with the tribe had become a rhythm that Ethan cherished. Every morning, he woke to the sounds of the forest, the birds, the wind through the trees, and the laughter of children as they ran to greet him. He joined the women in preparing meals, tending to the animals, and working on repairs around the village. His hands were skilled, his knowledge useful, and his presence steady. He had learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken, and he acted not for recognition, but because he genuinely cared for the people around him. This earned him not only trust but deep respect from every member of the tribe. Ethan had also grown emotionally connected to the women. It was not about romance or rivalry, but about mutual admiration and care. They appreciated his humility, patience, and willingness to learn. They valued his quiet strength, his reliability in times of need, and the gentle way he treated both children and elders. He, in turn, admired their courage, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to one another and to their community. There was a sense of mutual respect and understanding that went beyond words, a bond formed through shared effort, hardship, and triumph. One particularly memorable day, a sudden storm swept through the area. Rain poured down, and the wind howled through the trees. The river that ran near the village began to rise, threatening to flood the lower areas where animals were kept. Without hesitation, Ethan sprang into action. He guided the women in moving the goats and children to safer ground, reinforced shelters with whatever materials were available, and helped clear paths that were becoming blocked by fallen branches. The storm raged for hours, but thanks to their combined efforts, everyone remained safe, and the animals were unharmed. As the sun broke through the clouds afterward, the women looked at Ethan with gratitude and admiration. In that moment, he felt the full weight of their trust and affection. He was no longer just a helper. He was a guardian and a valued member of their community. The children, too, had come to adore Ethan. They followed him during chores, mimicked his movements while helping with animals, and sought his guidance when learning new tasks. He patiently taught them, offering encouragement and praise, never impatience. In return, the children brought him laughter, energy, and a sense of joy that he had not felt since his family had passed. Their affection was a reminder that he had become part of a living, breathing family, and that his presence mattered deeply to those around him. Ethan also played a role in the tribe's teaching and storytelling traditions. The women shared lessons of courage, survival, and respect for nature through tales and parables. Ethan contributed stories from his own life on the ranch, of hard work, perseverance, and lessons learned from animals and land. The tribe listened with attention and often nodded in appreciation. Through this exchange, Ethan realized that storytelling was not only about words, it was about connecting hearts and minds, passing wisdom, and strengthening bonds. He felt honored that the women valued his perspective and experiences. Over time, Ethan's influence in the tribe grew, but it was never about dominance or control. He never sought to lead or impose his ways. Instead, he worked quietly, supporting the women, helping the community thrive, and demonstrating reliability in every task. His knowledge of animals and farming techniques helped improve the village's sustainability, while his careful observation of the forest aided in hunting and foraging. More than anything, his presence brought a sense of stability and trust, which was deeply appreciated by the women. There were small moments that reminded Ethan of how far he had come. A woman would offer him a hand-woven basket she had made. A child would bring him a freshly picked flower. Or a simple nod of approval would greet his efforts. These gestures were expressions of affection and respect, subtle but powerful. He never took them for granted. Each day, He worked to honor the tribe's trust and to reinforce the bonds he had built through consistent effort, empathy, and humility. Ethan also came to understand the tribe's philosophy of life. The women valued cooperation over competition, empathy over pride, and action over words. They taught him that strength was not only physical, but also emotional and intellectual. Ethan embraced these lessons fully, realizing that his previous life as a solitary rancher had been guided by survival and independence. But life within the tribe was guided by connection, mutual respect, and shared purpose. One memorable afternoon, the tribe held a small ceremony to honor the changing seasons. Fires were lit, food was shared, and songs were sung. Ethan participated fully, helping prepare food, gathering firewood, and assisting children in their tasks. During the ceremony, the women acknowledged his contributions with quiet gestures and approving glances. He felt a deep sense of belonging, realizing that he was no longer an outsider, but truly part of this vibrant, caring community. As the months passed, Ethan's relationship with the tribe grew deeper. Every challenge, from storms to animal care to maintaining the village, had strengthened his bond with the women. He had learned patience, courage, and the value of silent support. The tribe had taught him lessons that went far beyond survival. They had taught him the meaning of community, respect, and love that is built on trust and consistency. Ethan often reflected on how different his life had become. He had come from a world of loneliness, where days were long and nights were empty. Now, he was surrounded by people who valued him, trusted him, and cared for him. The forest, which had once seemed foreign and intimidating, had become a home filled with lessons, laughter, and connection. He had found something far more precious than the solitude he had once cherished. A place where he belonged, where his actions mattered, and where he was loved for who he truly was. In quiet moments by the fire, Ethan would watch the tribe's women preparing meals, telling stories, and caring for children. He observed their interactions, their laughter, and the subtle ways they supported each other. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only for their acceptance but also for the opportunity to grow as a person and as a member of this remarkable community. The loneliness that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a deep connection that nourished both his heart and his spirit. Ethan had learned that true acceptance could not be demanded, only earned through kindness, patience, and consistent effort. He had come to understand that every small action mattered, offering help without expectation, showing respect for traditions, and treating every member of the tribe with care and dignity. Through these actions, he had built lasting relationships that transcended words and formalities. In the end, Ethan Miller was no longer the lonely rancher wandering the edge of the frontier. He had become a trusted, respected, and beloved member of the Apache women's tribe. He had earned their admiration through courage, humility, and unwavering support. More than that, he had won their hearts not through charm or cleverness, but through the simple yet profound acts of service, respect, and genuine care. As the sun set over the forest one evening, Ethan looked around the clearing, watching children play, women work together, and the community thrive. He felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. The journey from fear and uncertainty to trust and belonging had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had led him to a life richer than he had ever imagined. He had found not only a home but also a family, a community, and a sense of purpose that would stay with him for the rest of his days. Ethan Miller's story was a testament to the power of patience, respect, and dedication. It showed that even in the most unlikely circumstances, a person could find acceptance, friendship, and love by demonstrating sincerity, courage, and care. Through his journey, he discovered that true connection is built not through words or charm, but through actions, humility, and a heart open to learning and giving. And so, the lonely rancher who had once wandered the frontier, unsure of his place in the world, had found a new life filled with trust, warmth, and belonging. He was not just surviving, he was thriving, embraced fully by a community that had once seemed unreachable. Ethan's life had been transformed not by chance, but by his own patience, courage, and unwavering commitment to being a man worthy of trust and love. In the heart of the forest, among the Apache women's tribe, He had discovered what it truly meant to belong.